So, there was a little boy named Johnny, and Johnny was out playing in the front yard, and he was out near the bushes, and he noticed, crawling along one of the branches, this little caterpillar. It was just moving right along. And he had to take this caterpillar in to his mom to show her this fascinating creature that he discovered. Did we have any other boys or girls that used to do this, take things in to mom, to show mom, look what I found. And this is exactly what our mothers are wanting us to drag into the house. But anyway, so he brings in this little caterpillar, and he said, oh, can I keep him? Can I keep him? And his mom says, well, yeah, Johnny, you can keep him, but as long as you take care of him, you have to take care of him. You have to be very careful with them. So she gave him a big jar, and he put inside the jar, he put a stick, and he put some leaves, and every day he was looking at his little caterpillar, and he's bringing fresh leaves, and watching his caterpillar eat the leaves and go around. And one day, he noticed that the caterpillar crawled up onto the stick, and it began to act very strange. And he was worried by this. His caterpillar wasn't acting the way it normally did. It was sort of hanging from it, and he called his mother, and she saw what was going on, and she explained to him that the caterpillar was beginning to go through a metamorphosis. It was beginning to spin a cocoon. And so she explained to him this whole process that his caterpillar was going to go through, and how he was eventually going to become a butterfly. And now he got very excited by this. Now, he had seen butterflies out playing in the yard, but he never had seen the process, and here he's seen it firsthand, and he was thrilled to hear how it was going to change, and so he watched every day. He watched every day to see, is it a butterfly yet? Is it a butterfly? Is it yet? Is it a butterfly yet? And then one day, it began to happen. And he noticed at the end of the cocoon, a small hole appeared, and then there was his butterfly struggling to get out of the cocoon, struggling to shed this cocoon. And it was struggling so hard as it's trying to force its way through this little tiny hole. It looked desperate. It looked like it was stuck. It looked like it couldn't break free. It wasn't making any progress. And this was very upsetting to him. And so he had to do something. He had to do something in order to help his butterfly. And so he ran to go get a pair of scissors, and he walked back, because his mother told him at least that. You don't run with scissors. And he walked back, and he figured he would just help his butterfly just a little, and he snipped just a little bit in order to make it easier for the butterfly. And then the butterfly quickly emerged from the cocoon. And as he's looking at his butterfly, this looked different than any other butterfly he'd ever seen before. Because the butterfly he's looking at now, his butterfly, its body was very swollen, and its wings were shriveled and small and tiny. And he's watching and watching, and he knows any moment now that his butterfly is going to, its body will shrink and its wings will expand as butterflies should. He's continuing to look and continuing to look, and it didn't happen. His butterfly, it spent its short life crawling around with a swollen body and shriveled wings. And he called his mother and said, what is wrong with my butterfly? What happened to my butterfly? And so she took him to a biologist at a local college there, and he explained to Johnny the process of metamorphosis for the butterfly. And actually, when that butterfly was struggling to get out of the cocoon, it was supposed to struggle and effort in order to become a butterfly, as we know a butterfly. The efforting and the struggle would have forced the fluid from the body into its wings to expand. And so here Johnny and his effort, his intention to rescue, actually didn't help at all. Now you may be wondering why I'm starting out this morning by telling you a depressing story about Johnny and his butterfly. It isn't to depress you, Judy, it isn't. It really isn't to depress you. But it's instead for us to contemplate what we might have in common with the butterfly in our own metamorphosis and in our own struggles through life. So what is our theme for the year? It's a world that works for everyone. We're looking at and our for this month, a world that works for everyone. We couldn't have a theme for the year. We have to have it for the month too, right? We have to have the same theme for the month. A world that works for everyone is, in fact, when I was talking about this koan as far as about us holding the vision, there is an act of metamorphosis going on. Contained within the caterpillar, there was the vision of the butterfly, is there not? And in the world in that we're living in the life that we are living, there is the vision, there is the seed of the world that works. But there is our effort to realize that and have that experience. So metamorphosis is part of our process in getting there. Now I had to look up as far as what is metamorphosis in the terms of biology, because I'm not a biologist. And metamorphosis actually means something. It is the process of transformation from one stage to the next in the history of an organism. So the caterpillar to the, I don't know, what do they call it? Yeah, the pupa, right? And they have names for all this. I'm not a biologist. I'm not going to pretend to be one. But anyway, there are stages. There are stages all the way to the butterfly. And now, while we don't experience transformation in that same way, as far as we don't wrap up into a cocoon, well, maybe some do. Another definition I found for metamorphosis was a change of the form or nature of a thing or person into a completely different one. Any complete change in appearance, character, or circumstances. Let me ask you, anyone ever experienced a metamorphosis? Have you ever had a change? Have you ever had a change? A change that was so different that it was like one stage of your life that ended and a new one began. I would submit that actually those of us who are on a spiritual path, metamorphosis it's our journey. It is a way of being. It is our practice. Many people in the world, and actually many people on this path, would say they want transformation. They want metamorphosis, but they want it without the change. Right? You know who they are, right? They want the better life. They want the good. They want the better. But, the struggle that they might have to go through in getting there, or what feels like struggle. Today what I want to do is actually offer some thoughts about what can we do when we find ourselves bumping up against what might feel like a cocoon. What to do when we find ourselves where life seems to be happening to us. When we might find ourselves, there are times where I'm not going to put this on you, I'm not going to say that you've been there, but I've been in places in my life where I was hoping and wishing and praying, I think there's a song, that someone would run and get a pair of scissors and make the opening bigger for me. That someone would rescue me, someone would make things easier for me. Because where I was at in my life, it was hard and difficult. And it looked like, just like that butterfly, as trying to get out. Johnny looked at the butterfly, and it looked like his butterfly wasn't making any progress. I've been in places and times in my life where it felt like I wasn't making any progress. I'm spinning my wheels. I was feeling the pain of change. But this is what happens in transformation. Change, metamorphosis. What do we do when we are there? Well, one of the things why people don't like change is because usually pain comes about as a result of that. I was just before the service, I was talking about we come to, as kids, they outgrow their shoes, there might be a little pain, and when they go bumping up against their old shoes, right, the old size. The same way in our lives, when we're bumping up against the cocoon of our old life, and the new life is requiring us to break through, there's some pain that we might feel. But here's the question, though, is do we need to suffer? The title of the message today is Suffering Optional? Is suffering optional? Is there a way to go through life with pain and not suffer through it? We're going to take a look at that here this morning. Actually, there's an adage that actually says this, and this is sort of the basis of the talk, and this is the premise I'm using here this morning, is that pain is inevitable, but suffering is what? I'm going to suggest this morning that suffering is optional. Pain is going to happen. But so what's the difference? Well, let's start with what is pain? Well, pain, we'll go back. Or is there a timer on this?
No, it was me.
Oh, okay, I was just going to say. If it is, just leave it then. We're going back. Back the other way.
I'm trying.
Back the other way. Otherwise, okay, so you got the talk. All right, so.
I'm sorry.
Pain is inevitable, is what I'm saying here this morning. But let's start with pain. So what are some of the changes that people experience in their life? If I were going to say this, pain are the facts. This is what happens. You know what happens in life? People get sick and they die. We lose loved ones. Relationships end. People lose their jobs. Clothes can shrink. There are things happen in life that we have no control over. We wish we did. We don't like it, but it seems to be happening, and we just are sometimes along for the ride. That's what it can feel like. This is pain. This is what pain is. And it happens. Why change happens is because life is always expanding and evolving and growing, whether we're ready for it or not. Life is not static. And because it's not static, it's always changing. And so since we're part of life, guess what we're experiencing? Change. And when change happens, when the life that we're used to is ripped away from us, it hurts. Pain. But then if suffering's optional, what's suffering? What's the difference? If you were to look at pain as the facts of a situation, this is what happened. Suffering is, and there's a lot of definitions, but really the heart of it, what I want to get to is, I was told just before the service, is when we're wishing something was different than the way it is. When we're insisting, when we're claiming, when we're resisting what's in front of us. When we have beliefs and thoughts and attitudes that were either given to us or we adopted or however we came up with them, that are going through our heads, creating a running dialogue, a commentary about what's going on, and it's bumping up against what we're facing. I'll give you an example. Some examples of thoughts that might cause suffering, because suffering is the result of thoughts that are arguing with reality. Like, this cat is not barking. Why isn't the cat barking? I would be so much happier if he just barked. Bark! Bark! Cats don't bark. But me insisting that it should, what am I going to experience? Suffering. Mental anguish. Need to go see a doctor about that. But us telling ourselves, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that it happened. This always happens to me. These types of things always happen to me. You know what? Because I have the worst luck. I have the worst luck. She shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have did what he did. This sucks. Repeating that over and over again. Guess what your experience is going to be? It's going to be one of suffering. Now, what's the problem with suffering? Why is suffering, why? Here's the thing. Pain sucks already. And I'll edit this out. I'll do that. Because this is okay, right? I'll just, this is an adult. PG-13. Right? What's the problem with suffering? Suffering just makes the pain worse. You're already going through the pain. But now you're going to add insult to injury, so to speak. Suffering is like having two experiences for the price of one. Right? You're already going through the pain, and now you're just going to magnify it. And wallow in it. That's right, just get in there. Just make sure you're covered in it. I mean, the pain is already unpleasant. No, but why do we do this? Why do we do? I mean, because all of us, I know, you get this. You understand this. We're doing this to ourselves, but why do we? It's a habit. It's been modeled to us. Right? We have some great teachers in our life, and you know who they are, who have modeled how to suffer. You know, and just in the perfect way. Let me tell you, Ernest Holmes says a couple things. I'm going to share with you a couple quotes from Dr. Holmes. He said, the universe does not demand suffering. This goes back to the question, is suffering optional? The universe does not demand suffering. Suffering's man-made through ignorance. It will continue until we learn how to make it negative in our experience. And what that means, negative. When we make suffering of no value, when there's no value to it and it's a negative, then it will continue until that point. Someday, we shall have decided that we have had enough suffering. Amen. I got something else by him. God never intended man to suffer. Suffering may be salutary, beneficial, in that it leads us to a place where we learn that it is what? Unnecessary. So the only benefit to suffering is when we learn that we don't have to do it anymore. We shall cease to suffer as we more and more comply with the laws of the universe. All suffering is the result of some infringement of these laws. Now I get, that there are people might have different, I don't want to get into semantics. People might use the word pain and suffering and all this interchangeably. What I want us to know is that we can, Eckhart Tolle says, that we can have the experience of life when we move through life without resistance. That is grace. Suffering is the opposite of that. So whether you use the word suffering or pain or whatever terminology you use, there is an experience of life where you notice the cat meowing and you notice, well, it's not barking. That cat doesn't bark. And it's okay. I want to offer you some steps in order to snap us out of the suffering. Because if it's been a habit, what are some ways that we can use our pain in order to actually be a catalyst for our growth, or to transformation? And I'm going to use the letters P-A-I-N, pain. We're going to use pain to help us handle pain. Is that good? I came with that on my own. All right, so the first is the letter P. So when we find ourselves in a place where we're wanting something out there to happen and it's not happening quick enough, that's an indicator. That's an indicator that we're suffering. Well, at least we're going through some pain. The more time we're waiting for someone to rescue us, then that's probably where the suffering's kicking in. But the first thing to do when we notice this is to pause. Stop. Do a pattern interrupt. As far as just notice where you're at. And we're talking about, and I want to support you in something here. We're talking about pain and suffering. Pain does not have to be, or even suffering, doesn't have to come about as the result of some huge critical issue. It doesn't have to be. Someone can be dealing with suffering in their life, and it's not because that they had lost a job or lost a love, or they have the potential loss of life. It could be just losing one's joy. So what I'm talking about this morning isn't about, I'm not dealing with any big issue. Maybe, what if it's just, there's a saying that good can stand in the way of great. Have you ever heard this? Good can stand in the way of great. Things don't have to get bad in order for them to get better, or for you to make them better. But if we are living any place or in our lives where we are living diminished lives, where we're settling for, you know what the internal dialogue is of that. There's suffering going on there. There's suffering going on. If you're not living authentically, if you're not living freely, if you're not enjoying life, if there isn't joy in life, then there is a place for you to pause. If there's no joy in life, pause. Because you're meant to live in joy. It's your nature. So what's the tool? How can you do this with this pause? I'm going to give you something very simple. You don't have to take a class for this. We're going to talk about classes later. We've got some classes coming up. This is free. You're already doing it. Breathe. Breathe. Oh, and I hear some breaths being taken. Do you know, actually, I'm not going to get into all the physiological things that happen, but if you take a breath where the exhale is longer than the inhale. So if you do a slow exhale for a count of 5 and then an inhale for a count of 3, I do this all the time. Kevin goes, what are you breathing about? But if you do this for a moment or 2 or maybe even 5, where you're exhaling longer than the inhale, don't worry. I mean, you're not going to pass out. You know, your body, you can, but your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. And that is the part of your nervous system that is responsible for rest and relaxation. So you can actually move your body from here to where you're operating on almost instinct. You're creating space. You're taking a break. So you hit the internal pause button. You'll notice that things are out there. I'm waiting for someone to rescue me. Let me just breathe. Let me just pause. Let me stop. And then when you've stopped, this actually can help you get to the next with the letter A. This is to shine the light of awareness. Awareness. Bring your awareness to what's going on. Now, here's the thing. The suffering mind, the questions that it asks, many times are very why and how based. Why is this happening? Why didn't that work? Why did he say that? Why did she do this? How did this happen? Do you get this? How am I going to come up with the money? See, the suffering mind is grasping at a solution. It's focused on the problem. There's something that Eckhart Tolle says in The Power of Now. He says, when you are full of problems, there is no room for anything new to enter. No room for solution. So whenever you can, make some room. Create some space. See, by us pausing and then bringing our awareness to what's going on inside, not looking at the outside, but inside, then we're allowing ourselves to create some space. And you know, a way that you can create some space is ask some new questions. Instead of the why and the how about some what-driven questions? What am I reacting to? What could have been done differently? What can I do? What is another way I can look at this? Oh, and here's one of my favorites. What would I love in this situation? You see, we're creating some space for us to get another handle on it. Actually, by shining the light of awareness, we're allowing ourselves to actually move into the next letter is we're allowing ourselves to get some insight into what's going on. There is a new way to see the condition. If we give ourselves a space, we can see into the pain and look at it from a totally different perspective. If we give ourselves the space to do so. This situation, whether it's a job loss, this breakup, this diagnosis, it is the means to my next end. The caterpillar went through a metamorphosis. There's one stage to another, to another, to another. The caterpillar went in, formed a cocoon, and then the life of the caterpillar, gone. It dissolved in the goo. The caterpillar, this is the truth, it's gone. What arises out of that, almost like the phoenix out of the ash, there's imaginal cells. There are cells that are there in that goo, almost like, what are the cells in our bodies? The ones that are stem cells that can become anything? Well, is in that goo, there's these imaginal cells that have the pattern of a butterfly, not a caterpillar. And that's what gives birth. We can look at the situation that we're currently in, whatever it is that you're facing right now, you can look at this and say, oh, this could be, if you let it, this could be what defines you for the rest of your life. We all know people who something that's happened decades ago, they're still telling the same story, right? They haven't broken through the cocoon of that. It's defined them. You could use this situation, instead of it defining you, you could say, this is the next step of my evolution. This is my cocoon. A year from now, what is the story I'm going to tell about this? A year from now, I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to say, okay, this is then, this is where I'm at now. This is how I pushed through that barrier. See, this is the insight that we can have about this. We can become a broken record, telling our sad tale of woe. And you know, people, if that's who you become, people aren't going to invite you to parties. I'm just letting you know. Nobody wants those people at their parties. Or instead, you can use whatever you're facing and know that this is your cocoon. And the new life, your evolution, is just on the other side of this. The pain that you're experiencing, this is just you bumping up against the old structures. That's all. The caterpillar went into the cocoon in order to become a butterfly. You're going through this in order to become a butterfly. But guess what? You can only become a butterfly by moving through the cocoon. Struggle is going to happen. Pain's inevitable. But suffering, see how you choose to see it? If you choose to see this as this is what it looks like while it's working out, it becomes, with this perspective, I will tell you that if you have this perspective about life, there is nothing that can happen in your life that is not for your good. Everything is serving up your good. Each and every situation, it is. This is how we say, I was just telling you, a world that works for everyone. Yes, everything in your life is here to serve you to the next great experience. If you hold on for the ride. But if you offer up resistance and wish things, if that cat would only bark, well, you know what? The ship has sailed. And we're just going to leave you sitting there looking at that cat. Suffering is optional. There's one more question here with the insight. And this one, if you ask your mind a question, if you sit with it, you will get an answer. And I love this question. But is, what can I now do with what I have that can move me in the direction of this new becoming? What can I do with what I have? Now, if you might notice something, if you get an answer to this, if you get an answer to this question, it's an action step. Do you get that? It is what? It's what driven. But it's an action step. What do you think you might do if you have an action step? Take some action. Take the next step, which is N, which is the N in pain. The last letter. Next steps. Action is what closes the circuits. Action is what closes the circuit. Nothing until if the caterpillar or actually it's a butterfly, right? Is looking out the little hole, looking and waiting, and takes no action, no evolution. Action's required. And I get that most, if not all, will feel fear about taking whatever that next step is. You will feel fear. And you know why I know that? Because fear is what keeps you in your comfort zone. Fear is what keeps you in the cocoon. The reason you're feeling fear and why it's painful is like, oh my gosh, what's happening is not in my comfort zone. But fear is not an indicator that you can't be or do or have whatever it is that's calling you to be, do, and have. Whatever your next level of becoming is. Fear doesn't mean you can't have it. It just means you were a caterpillar, and look at this, you got some wings now. Well, what do I do with these? How? Oh, what do you mean I'm not going to cling to the tree? Oh, how am I going to live my life then? I fly, I soar. You get this? Fear. You know, I heard this joke. Do you know what the snail who climbed on the back of the turtle said when the turtle began to move? That would be a good one. No, he went, woohoo! Now we're moving. Now we're moving. Your next step, whatever the action is that comes for you, when you have you're feeling the pain, and then you realize that it's moving into suffering because you're wishing someone would rescue you. You're wishing that the answer is out there somewhere. When you hit the pause button, when you breathe and allow yourself to move your awareness inwards and grab a new insight that this is serving me and I have what I need. I have everything within me to take the next step. And so what is that step? When you take that step, it may feel like you're really moving now. Things begin to move. Life is waiting for you to move. Life is waiting for you to move. It responds to the motion, what you set into motion. Or it might feel like more pain. What do you do if you feel pain? You pause. Shine the light of awareness, insight. What's the next step? This is how we can use pain for our transformation. Now, I want to leave you with one last quote from Dr. Holmes. And I love this one. He says cosmic 2x4 without saying cosmic 2x4. He says, nature will not let us stay in any one place too long. You know, even though we might be clutching and clinging and not wanting to move, nature will not let us stay. She will let us stay just long enough to gather the experience necessary to the unfolding and advancement of the soul. Nature demands the change in order that we may advance. When the change comes, we should welcome it with a smile on the lips and a song in the heart. You see, someone who really sees everything going on in their life as serving them that it is a means to the next end, then when change comes, then you are able to have a smile on your face. So my prayer for all of us is that we, in creating a world that works for everyone, and you know, we talk about everyone, when we're talking about creating a world for ourselves, as we go about creating a world that works for us, because I believe through individual happiness, this is how we make a difference, a greater difference in the world. That we use our pain as a catalyst for our transformation. As we see it for the catalyst it really is, rather than choosing to suffer out of the habits, the way that we've been raised. Peace and love, everyone. Soar like a butterfly.